Welcome to TradeTheNBA.com. This is John's reports for the 19th of April. Well, we continued the slide higher, and still consistent with the magenta being nicely over the yellow. It's one of the cleaner runs that you'll find. I mean, it's just been straight up and clean, and we've had blue over the green here. Every time you get a little shift of the red below, you tend to get some softness, and in this case all that softness was just to retrace to the ABM, which as long as the ABM stays in this reasonable range and you don't get that power gap up between it, may continue to ride like this for some time. I mean, we've had cyan under red this entire range. We're seeing a lot more activity though from shorts, which means they are building, but complete reset of steel, which means short-term buyers are readily available. And if they're able to hold on for a little while longer, they'll have that new fund money print. That would be enough. However, don't forget, positive extreme with the low right there to 4,021. Always worth noting that. From an NQ standpoint, just the opposite. Close below. Clear weakness. We had a rollover of both green, which isn't as big a deal because it moved the blue above, which is still in the bullish, but from a more bullish standpoint, you'd want to see red riding above that blue, and it's not. In this case, it faded fairly decent all the way back to the ABM. So, and we talked about that a long time ago, that there was a divergence between the S&P and the NASDAQ, and that it was still playing out that way. Gold starting to unleash itself. We had reports from China that they're allowing a lot more import of gold in that as they get ready to potentially launch their cryptocurrency backed by gold or some other version thereof, which is all intended to displace the dollar. And we're seeing some of that displacement here because of the record spending in that, and the euro climbing because frankly the euro, we've talked about this repeatedly, the eurozone is a disaster. But if the US is going to outprint as far as money, and this is part and parcel of why we see the market doing what it's doing, despite where people see earnings ratios and things like that not relevant, because the market is discounting the devaluation of the dollar ahead of it. Should you see interest rates rise in that? I think that's when you really begin. That's the big question mark, because that would be a substantial reason for a major shift out of equities, and that leaves a whole lot of room downside. From a Bitcoin standpoint, also because this is sort of that counter argument to dollar and fiat currencies, and it's been at highs, of course, each time we get these sell signals. They're pretty decent. Even the little buy that came in through there. For me, it's an interesting one because it seems to respond very well off those red MBI numbers, the punt -4. Whenever you get into those negative numbers, you tend to get those immediate reactions. And once this popped up to around the 10 area, is when usually you start to get that carry through. So capturing it earlier than that just is a bonus when you see all those pivots taking place. The secondary pivot of green with blue already rising, and that was right there at about 60,900. So not a huge boost, but 1,000 plus on there, not bad. And from an ES standpoint, well, let's go back to the start of the day because it was pretty clean. We ended up with a little teeny soft patch that really wasn't going anywhere because the momentum of it had been beaten up on the first signal right there. And so when the secondary came, you were already in what we might call a bit of an oversold setup. So when it pivoted up, no surprise that took us to, it was just like a 10-point move going up before the sell, and then we had another 5 or 6 going down. And then when this popped up, we started getting some positive extremes right in the middle of the run, and the final one came right there. So when we saw the rollover, it was easy to say, hey, if you're an advanced reader, it's like, yeah, you can get out of that a little bit earlier for a few extra points, because it didn't look like it was going to sustain anything from a up standpoint, though it held on quite a bit, and we kept getting these off and on buy sells with little swings, and then finally came the GAM yellow candle on that positive extreme. So that became a retest value. Oops, didn't move that. And you had a series of those from before as well, so it started to fill in some of the potential returns. And the little red dot one here is a interesting one that I'm working with. Is a little bit of a counterintuitive one where you have the downslope of all of these readings, and within that you get a positive move, and that it's a lot of other math going on in there, but it tends to capture high points, and it doesn't happen very often, which is even better because it makes it more poignant when it does. And even if you waited though for the normal signal, which was the magenta line, and that produced all the way to the end of the day within the cell. It was interesting because you barely got to the zero line with the red, and that left enough for it to give a continuation, and pretty much stayed in there until the bottom of the run. So filled in single part of the positive stream. That's healthy in my mind. We started to see the first rollover in the 50K as well, where you had the red move below and magenta below yellow, and below the 33 level, which made it a bit more significant. Of course, you would need to see the blue to completely to get any kind of sustained or followed through move on that. And it's been a while because we had that nice up run, and we've just been holding above that 33 level bullish range for a while with blue over. You just get these subtle back and forths every time you get your red moving back above the blue. You get a little bit of strength, dips back, a little bit of weakness, and then if it continues is when you start to get a little bit more expanded weakness. So those are the things you look for in those setups. From a DOC standpoint, we had the DOC spread, which took place right at the same at the magenta level, and it just pretty much remained flat, where you had long-term buyers just sort of fade out of that, and you really couldn't get any mid-term buyer support. So with that con in between, it was okay. Better would be to see the orange caught between the cyan and red, where you get continuation or follow through kind of trade, and not yet seeing that, but it's possible it can develop at the start of the week's action. It's Saturday, so before Sunday's action, we won't know until the Hong Kong Open if it's going to give a little bit of a continuation there, but looks like we're pretty much at the bottom of that. There isn't a whole lot left. What you would want to see would be a pop-up that's shallow, that then gives another ability for a range lower if it's going to stay that way. So all we can do is follow it along. Certainly I will be putting up relevant charts as new developments take place. As you can see with all the different colored little dots here, there's all sorts of other program setups that are being developed within it that it gets complicated, because once you make one change, it affects all the other relationships, and so you just have to go through and monitor to make sure that everything's performing exactly as it should. And overall, though, nothing to be upset about. We're capturing pretty decent bottoms as well as near tops, and that's the best you can really hope for on a consistent basis. So happy with that. As always, though, trade well. We'll talk to you later.